The other big thing that has helped, and if anybody hasn't taken it, do it, is the inventory management, because I'd learned a ton from Jill. Even math I didn't want to learn. But but the just it's still a process for us, and I don't have a lot of things automated yet, which is why I spend probably more time on it than I should. But I'm slowly getting there, but just really it's really, really fine tuned as to what we order and when. And, again, the first couple of years, you sort of just go, wow, catalog, and just freaking order everything. So, we're learning our customer base a lot more, and we're learning to, what's working and what's not.
And how big is your store and how many employees do you have?
It's 1,000 square feet, probably 800 square feet of selling space. And I have 4 part-time employees. So 2 day shifters, 2 afternoon shifters, and I do in between.
Cool.
Yeah.
Maggie, are you up for next?
Actually, can I ask Shari a question?
Yeah, Ken, go ahead. I'm sorry.
To interrupt. And Shari, you probably already said this, but do you keep track of sales during the event? And I don't mean just the event book, but maybe all of the books that were sold by bringing people into the store.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So that's
I'm
the
sorry if you
first
said that
class.
already.
No, I didn't. But that's the first class that I took out of the booksellers class things.
Okay.
Was the event management, which also was freaking brilliant. And, it taught you to do a spreadsheet on variables to measure besides just number of books sold. So,
Right.
and assigning a point value to each of them, so you can know really if an event is successful, if it's getting shared out there, all those sorts of things. So that's been brilliant.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
Ken, you actually, let's go to you next. We'll spare Maggie. Ken,
Sorry. That's what I get for speaking
That's what
up.
happens when you ask a question. You get nailed. Yeah, what keeps you up at night, and what solutions have you been working on? What problems is trouble you, and what solutions have you been working on?
Well, as some of you know, I'm not actually in a bookstore anymore. I'm with the Book Industry Charitable Foundation.
Right.
And I'm running the BincTank program, which again, if you don't know, is the incubator for new BIPOC-owned bookstores. So if you know anybody who wants to open a bookstore and they're a person of color, please send them our way. My main concern right now is that it's an election year, and it's going to be, and Trump, again. So somebody's going to be sucking. I mean, regardless of your politics, somebody's going to be taking up a lot of airtime and a lot of social media space. And I think that's going to be hard to break through for almost everybody. Yeah, so that's my concern.
It's interesting. Yeah, that's something that in the marketing world, it's like whatever the anti-Christmas is, it's an election year. And yet I'm not even sure with every problem, there's got to be a solution. So there's got to be a way of pivoting to that. So books about.
I mean, there might be people that are just tired of all politics that you can market to, but I do agree with Ken that in 2016 in the fall, particularly like in September-ish, like the fall started really slowly because of the election season.
Yeah. And then pivoting into it by featuring books about elections, dictatorships, whatever, is just adding to the din. You have to differentiate yourself rather than follow along in that case, I think, but curious. Well, why don't we go, let's see, let's go to Maggie at Flyleaf. Maggie, what keeps you guys up at night? You're muted right now. Still muted.
She's trying. There she goes.
Oh, she goes. Okay.
There you go. Sorry. I had to move that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. I would just say that just thinking about new events, ways to, as getting people out and kind of cutting through everything that's happening. I think post-pandemic people are, their calendars are full again. And so trying to kind of look at what we did before everything stopped and kind of as we've restarted it now for a few years, trying to kind of like, look at what does work as an event and also from a marketing standpoint, just where does our current audience want to, what kind of things do they want to do? What do they want to hear from us? What kind of relationship do they want to have with us? That kind of crosses over, the events we do, whether they're community events or authors on tour, and just finding that right balance. So that is what I'm kind of focusing on for 2024 is trying to think about fun ways to have successful events that, make a lot of money with sort of minimal effort of staffing. the magic one.
Maggie, a couple of questions. You're in charge of events, right? You got muted again.
I am in charge of events. Yeah.
And when you look at Flyleaf in terms of a personality, which is something Lisa and I have been urging in some of the classes we were teaching in the summer, how do you curate the events in terms of a particular kind of take on the audience and what the bookstore should stand for or represent character-wise, or how do you, in other words, are you narrowing that to solve some of the, or to keep, promoting and selling?
I think, can you hear me now?
Yep. Well,
You just
go
muted
off.
again.
Now you're off. You were on.
All right, here I go again. I'm using my phone instead of my computer, so it's kind of fiddly. I think we kind of counter to that, just try to have a range of events, whether it's just trying to make sure that, many voices and many elements of our community are heard, and having a space for lots of different members of our community, because we're a college town, but there's a lot of retirees and families, and we're in a growing area. Lots of people transplanted here over the last few years during the pandemic, so it's sort of changing demographic for North Carolina, but it's still North Carolina. So yeah, there's a huge range of things we can do, and so that's great. So really, it's almost there's too many options.
And do you think that you portray your bookstore through your events as many voices? Maybe that's the focus, is that it's a more diverse community center than other places around you?
We want to try to move towards having more panel discussions and more things where we have lots of different voices speaking rather than a traditional author. Well, I think it's gone away from the model even of just an author reading from their book. And that kind of maybe happened during video, as we were moving to Zoom and Crowdcast during the pandemic, and there was always a conversation partner, and it's moved much more to that, whereas that before might have just been a large event. So, and I think beyond that, it's more interesting to kind of have more, for us, we're kind of looking to do more sort of community panel discussions and things surrounding a book or a topic. But I think that's something that excites us for 2024. And we're doing one at the end of this month with UNC Press for a book called Gun Country. And I don't know if you know that we had a couple of instances right after UNC came back into session in the fall where we had a shooting on campus, and it was another situation that happened just a few weeks later, and it was very traumatic for our community. We were on lockdown for a day, and it was the day that the first day of school for our local school district, so it was just awful. So we're having a panel later this month with a Duke professor from the Duke Firearms Center, from the author of this book, and from Students Demand Action, and a journalist from the Charlotte Observer. So we're trying to think about ways to have talks and events that are not just typical book talks. And we're excited about this panel and partnering with a university press that we've done a lot of typical kind of author events, but we're just trying to think outside the box about what our community might respond to.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned from a lot of the conferences I participated in is that a really good interviewer and a single respondent who's been prepared is better sometimes than panel discussions. But if you have a really good moderator for panel discussions and people know there's going to be a pointed debate about something like guns, that's really good. But it's when people tell war stories on panels that it gets kind of boring for the audience, except for the insiders. But you know that. George, do you want to talk about what's your biggest challenge and keeping you up at night?
Well, in the last 2 years, my inventory's doubled. And what you see behind me is typical of the whole store. So I need to but what concerns me the most is, unlike the rest of you, I have to figure out how am I going to clean things up a little bit, because in March I turn 80, and so we got to look at the I don't want to leave a store full of a mess for my niece and nephew to have to deal with when I'm gone. So I'm trying to slowly work in that direction, but I'm like my dad. I'm a bit of a pack rat, and I've just got to. That's what keeps me up at night. I mean, the day-to-day stuff is always there because I run this store still entirely by myself. So,
how big is your store, George?
Oh, it's at least 1,000 square feet of selling space, and the building itself is the downstairs is about 1,800 feet, but the back section is a storage room, and then there's the back of the store, which is also storage and so forth. I live in the apartment above the
Where you're in.
above the store, so I never get away.
Maybe that's what should keep you up at night.
No, I switched to a phone system called UMA, which is internet based.
Yeah.
And they were able to grab the landline number and incorporate it in there. But what happened is that the extensions upstairs no longer work. So the only way somebody can reach me when I'm not in the store is by my cell phone, and I can limit who has access to that number and so forth. So I do get away. But I've gotten tuned to where I can hear the mailbox lid open and shut when I'm laying in bed upstairs. You get tuned into all the little odd noises that are around there. But I don't know. I'd have to say the biggest problem is sorting through all the catalogs and trying to figure out what to order that I think I can sell here in this store. Because I just did my top 10, I ran a list of the top 100 books, but I separated out in groups of 10, and it kind of surprised me a little bit that I'm still selling mostly children's books and mysteries, which is where I started out 25 years ago.
Well, there's a focus there. That's good. Despite the disorganization, there's a focus. Sandi, do you want to talk a little about what's keeping you up?
Sure. We've decided to host a book festival next October, so that's keeping me up now.
Already
trying to work with a committee on getting it all set up and everything, and starting small. So we're working on that, and ordering is always a big thing for me, is just trying to make sure that I'm ordering the right books. And we're going into our 5th year, and I feel like I finally kind of sort of have a handle on it. And one of the things that I got from the event course that I took is I'm actually focusing on more non-author events rather than just author events.
Yeah, talk about that a little more. That's fascinating.
So our library does a really great job when it comes to book clubs, and they have kids' story times and everything, but there's not really a whole lot of activities for kids. So we're exploring how we can do some Lego events with the kids that involves purchasing a package of Legos, and then us doing alternative builds with what they have, doing some craft events, things that they don't normally have for kids. So that's what we're looking at.
And if I should have asked the others this, but I'll go back through them eventually. What would you hope most to get out of these sessions?
I get a lot out of them, listening to everybody else's ideas and everything. Even though, we're going on our 5th year and I've been in the book business for well over 18 years, I learned something new from each and every single one of these, and listening to the other people makes a big difference. It's where I get some of the ideas, for the things that I want to do. Like somebody had mentioned about, with 2024 being an election year and everything, we actually got rid of our current affairs section and we moved it into history, and we call it past and present. So we're not putting a big focus on, the political books by having a current affairs section. It's just all in one section now. And that seems to be something that my customers like a lot better.
That's terrific. That's really fascinating, because I've felt for a long time that bookstores shouldn't be so categorized, that everything should be more about appeal, the way a retail store is. And, that's the James Daunt lesson as well. So what you're doing is slowly maybe collapsing things a bit, so they're a little more broad, and people don't just go to the sci-fi and that's all they're interested in. They leave the store, but they kind of browse around more, which is great. And have you seen an impact on sales of either non-political books or political books, history books?
We do really well with history books. We have 6 colleges and universities all around us, all within less than a 90-minute drive. So, we get a lot of the parents and grandparents and everybody visiting. And, if you think about it, we have 6 presidential homes all within a 2-hour visit of us. So we get all of those visitors that come in, and they're just interested in history.
It's interesting that was 6 universities and colleges around you. It's the people who are coming to visit, not the students themselves, or is that true?
Well, so Mary Baldwin is right down the street from us, so those students have easy access to us. James Madison is in Harrisonburg, so those students drive in on weekends. Bridgewater is within driving distance, so is it Blue Ridge Community College. In the community college, those students mostly come from our area, so we see them when they come in. But it's, we see the Mary Baldwin students more, and they have a big Shakespeare program there. And of course, we have the American Shakespeare Theater here. So we have a pretty big Shakespeare section. We actually separated that one out. And
that's great.
You just can't keep it full.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're thinking of, informal partnerships. They're not really partnerships, but you're really segmenting your audience to who's around you and who's visiting. On the coast here, Steve Sparks, who has Point Reyes bookstore, half his sales are tourists because they come to the California coast. Half, that's what he really has to figure out. What the other half is. It's pretty clear what you have for tourists. Interesting. Let's see, Beth, have I asked you yet?
Nope, not yet. So actually not a lot kept me up at night until about mid-September, because we had been, every month we were breaking records and just getting better and better. And we couldn't believe it. We were like, just waiting to see what the next month would do. And then, we got surrounded by construction. And then I'm in Michigan. We had the UAW strike.
Oh, right.
And now I finished in the red for the first time in 20 years. So right now we're in worst case scenario. We can downsize. We don't want to do that, because if we do that, then we lose all capabilities of facilitating all the charitable works that we do in the community. We just won't be big enough to do it. We're a 3,000 square foot store with 13 rooms and support a ton of charities. So we're proactively flipping the store right now, creating more community space, and promoting a customer loyalty program, where if they come in once a month and support us, then they're entered into a drawing for a year of free reading. I'm a used bookstore, so it's easy to facilitate a year of free reading in 2025. And not connected to the loyalty card, anybody who is in our system and comes in to support us in a month is eligible, goes into the drawing for a $25 gift certificate the next month. And so what we're really,
when you say who comes in, does that include purchase or not? Does it matter if they're buying?
it's got to be a purchase.
Yeah.
Yes, we let them know we're being very open and honest with our community. Basically, like, we don't blame anybody for not coming in. We were literally surrounded by construction, and we knew that with the strike that was going to hurt our numbers.
Construction over now?
The construction is over, and that was the thing, was we really weren't worried, because we figured once the construction was over, the strike was over, we'd been posting record numbers. We thought, okay, they just can't get to us right now, it's no big deal. But construction ended mid-November, and we did not have a holiday season. And we were all over social media. We had our sales, we had, all the things that we usually do that generally drum up a lot of business.
Was anything related to the strike, like labor history books or anything, selling more because of the debate?
Well, being a used bookstore, I only have in available what people bring in, and we've got a very small Michigan section because people have a tendency to hang on to it here.
Yeah. Interesting.
So I'm next to Flint, so a very historical area here as far as the sit down strike and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. And so in terms of events, you didn't put on events that somehow were keyed into what was going on in the community either?
Nope.
Yeah. Okay.
We had our author events, we had our regular events, and because we are usually so busy during the holidays, we quit doing any events mid-November until the end of the year.
I see.
But we are bringing back our silent book club. We haven't done that in a couple of years because of COVID. We've got Fun Day Fridays we're bringing back. Our pajama story time we're bringing back. All of the pre-COVID stuff, we're going to be bringing it back. And opening up a community room so that we can support more people.
Interesting. Yeah, cool. Let's see, Lisa, do you want to talk about your bookstore? Wherever you are.
Sure. If I can do it without coughing, I'm good. That's going to be the key today. We had a great holiday season, and what keeps me spinning right now is how to do it all. There's so much energy, there's so much great ideas, there's so many things to do, and doing them without things falling off the plate and keeping everybody coordinated in doing all of the activities. That's the trick right now, because we have a large board of advisors, and they're all engaged. They've come up with, we've got a literary ball, we've got monthly things, we've got author events multiple times a week, we've got a lot of things going on. And so just the care and feeding of all the engaged people, I think, is what I'm struggling with, is how to give them enough energy and enough direction so that it feels like the car is moving very fast, and I kind of have a toe on the on the gas and the pedal. So it's controlling the motion, I guess, might be part of what we're worried about. We're finishing at break even, so that's exciting.
How big is your store, and how many employees do you have?
We have 1,100 square feet, which is small. We're doing a lot of turns, so we're right now tracking around 7.5 turns, which is so we're really flipping the inventory a lot of focus
I'm
on
sorry to interrupt
display
you, Lisa, but 7.5 turns per year.
per year, and we have 15 total people, which is a lot of people working a little bit. So we have about 4 people that work in a core way. but I'm not able to be in the store every day. So, and Ashley, our store manager, is not either. So she's focusing on inventory and events. And so everybody's got a piece of the highway, and we use Slack to stay connected. And I have, you know, ADP security. It's a little bit of a different model because we have so many people involved, and because we're trying to flip inventory so fast and carry less, turn more.
Two questions. So how big is your inventory? How many books do you have in the store, do you think?
We have about 8,500 books right now at any given time.
And do you want to just talk for a minute? Because I was fascinated by this, by the part-time people who put in like 5 hours a week, but they have a specialization, because I think that's a really interesting model.
Well, we're working in pairs, and the focus is threefold, and I won't say that we have achieved it yet, but it's that everybody, every shift does three things. They make a new friend, build rapport with somebody. They make a shelf talk, you know, in terms of a display, and they fall in love with a new book, which does not mean get deeply into reading a new book. So that's one of the things that I'm curious as to how others have handled it, is that our staff will sometimes get so consumed by the book that's interesting to them that, you know, I walked in the other day and we had 3 people working because it was Christmas, and 2 people were reading and didn't notice that I walked in, and the other person was at the counter and didn't notice that I walked in. And so I was behind the counter before anybody said hello. So we're working on reinforcing falling in love with a book, but not too far in love with a book every shift. But it's everybody does have a specialization. We realize that we cannot support the store, even in a nonprofit model, very well without added out of store sales. So we have somebody focusing on schools, somebody focusing on library partnerships, someone focusing on book clubs, someone focusing on B2B. So we kind of have created a kind of a big model. So what is, there's some really nice things about that. And what's really hard about that is it's a lot of legs.
Ken, did you have a question?
For Lisa, yeah. Hi.
Hi, to see you. I'm sorry.
Okay. Let me preface this by saying I haven't actually been in a buyer position since 2011, and so maybe I'm really out of date. But 7.5 sounds really high to me.
I know everybody tells us we don't have enough inventory, but
well, I mean, it's I mean, the wisdom used to be that if your turns were much over 4 or 5, that you must be constantly running out of things.
right.
So do you find that to be the case? I'm just curious. I don't want to take up everybody's time with this, but
That's a good question.
Or is it because of outside sales?
Well, it's come to our a couple of things we've noticed about the people who come in. 90% of them are saying things like, I'm really not a reader, or I haven't read in a long time. And they're not coming in a transactional way saying, I want this book, most often. So what they're coming in for is sort of a book consultation. It's the same reason I go to the plant store 2 doors down. I go to the plant store not because I'm a great grower, but because I want to be. and I want somebody to lead me by the hand and show me the plant I can't kill. And similarly, we believe that our folks are coming in wanting to be led to displays, wanting to discover things that they haven't thought about before, not necessarily looking for a particular book. Now, there are particular books that we've carried in, large copies. Being 70 miles from Laverne, Tennessee's distribution center with Ingram helps, because in a couple of days we can get replenishment. We order every day. So we have a daily ordering system, and we have one person who turned out not being very good with people at all, but he's really good at receiving. So he comes in for maybe 6 hours a week at the wee hours and end of day and does a stellar job. He's an engineering major. He does a stellar job of receiving and categorizing and getting everything ready. So we have this ongoing receiving process. And that seems to be working. I'm new at this. For as many years as I've been around the industry, this is a completely new thing. And I've had a lot of Jill's help through the mastermind to really be where we are. But I realize we're sort of in a unique position with the turns thing. But the experiment that I'm trying is how to get everybody engaged in talking through the displays and really making the displays be stories and engage people and pull people into books and reading. And that seems to be working. People are leaving with things they didn't plan on leaving with.
So your explanation is that you're hand selling. It's not that you're selling 100
totally.
books at 100 of a book.
So Lisa, to Ken's
That's
point, one thing
amazing.
you could do is if you can track all of your out of store sales, schools, B2B events, and just take that sales figure out of your sales for the year and then run your turns and see where you are. Because those event books usually come in, they get sold and they go out.
We've only
Is
had
your
really
inventory level.
That's a good point, Jill. We've had about
Just take out of your sales and run your turns
yeah.
again.
You're cutting in and out.
To see how
We've had 3. We can do that, Jill, and that's a great point. I can do that pretty easily. We only had 3 events that we had significant sales this past year. Most of our hoped for sales are in the coming year. So we had one that had 300 books, one that had 500 books, and one that had about 170 books. So I can pull those out and pull. But generally we're moving things at a brisk pace, and we are running out of things, but then we replace them with other things, and those other things sell, and then 2 days later we do something else. So it's I think people are finding us for the unexpected. Maybe that's and I guess that's a question, is that going to work? Is that a good model? But for us, it's allowing us to move from a deep red position at the beginning of the year after 7 floods to breaking even at the end of the year this year, which is where we wanted to be.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious about the turn issue, because I've always been amazed by the 7 turns stat. There is a rule in the publishing world we learned at Heyday, which is that if you're not getting the normal percentage of books being sent back, returns, you're not sending out enough books. You're not supplying enough books to people that you need to have. But it's like a negative positive thing. And then in a way, with your turns, that you're running out of books frequently is maybe a good situation rather than satisfying the problem.
Well, and if you look at, from a math standpoint, we would have to, if we cover a normal store, I think we would probably carry triple the books, and have fewer turns. So it's the same money, really. If you have fewer books, you need more turns to make the same money, or you turn, you turn more books. But we like having the shelf space for a lot of face outs and a lot of display to make sure that we can make it look full and fresh, and that we're keeping, there's always something new to find out. So we have a lot of people who are there every day and expect to find something new. And then a big bunch of people who are visiting the area and are just coming in one time. But being a nonprofit store and educating people about what that means for our community and what we're trying to do, that's the most exciting. But for me, it's just a lot of balls juggling. That's the thing that's.
Well, you have the advantage of also having a side business, large side business, fixture, bookstore fixture, besides a bunch of other things you do. So in a way, I remember when I had a film production company, I had this cash flow. I might be losing money, but I had a big cash flow, so I could invest in stuff. I was my own bank in a way when you have a cash flow. So it's an advantage you have, but it's a great model. It's fascinating. And Ken just posted a note a minute ago about if you're doing that through hand selling, which is what sounds like you're doing, you're really focused on your staff and having a lot of people in there who are interesting. And hopefully look up from their books and talk to the customers. I think it's a really interesting model. Do you think, at least we should move on to other people, but do you think your model is applicable to somebody who has a small standalone store and only a couple part-time people, if that? Or do you need capital to do what you're doing, basically?
Well, I don't think you need capital to do what we're doing. I think we've done it with less capital, actually. We didn't buy as many books as we should have or wanted to. We bought books from Whirlwind, who was going out of business, which is really not the way to buy books because they were 2017 titles, in 2022. So I think the key the thing everybody has something. What I love about this industry is that every bookstore is so completely unique and has to find the thing that works for them beautifully, like Sandi being next to Mary Baldwin and with all those presidents and all those things. That's something nobody else has. And we're trying to find the thing that only we can do, that is unique to us and where we are in position. So I think everybody can do that. Find your uniqueness and leverage it. And the other thing I think that all of us can do is figure out how to tell stories and displays. Because if we're going to sell stories, we have to tell stories. That's what I'm having fun with. We play a game called You Can't Sell This Book. So the staff every day is like, they're like, you can't sell this book. And we pull one of the old ones from like Whirlwind or something. The last one was on Concrete of America. And, and it was like, you can't, and so I'll make a little bit. I'll be like, I give it an hour, I give it 2 hours. And so we have this little internal wager and we'll display it. And, if it sells within 2 hours, the time I said, then we get a point. And if not, then it doesn't. And most of the time it sells. Most of the time it prevails. And that helps encourage us that positioning and attention and the way you make the shelves talk does matter.
Yeah. I was going to say that we have a chain out here. I think it's the biggest one in California, Copperfield, which I think is in 6 or 7 towns. In fact, the founder, I think, Lisa, lives near you. And the store in my town, Sebastopol, is sort of a hodgepodge. It's large. It's probably 4,000 square feet or something, 3,000, but it's full of pot holders and cards and toys, and it's kind of cluttered. And I never thought it was very successful. I was in another one they have in Corte Madera, and I'll show you a picture of a shelf. This is the shelf, typical shelf in that store. What they're doing is face out to the extreme, very uncluttered, even though it's also a Copperfield. And they're very focused on kids and parents. The store was full. It's Christmas time or post-Christmas, but still busy. And the store was full of all sorts of kids and people like that. So it was a really interesting example of what we're talking about here in terms of don't make your store a storage place with spines out. Try and make it as much display, which is sort of an extension of hand selling, I would argue.
Yeah.
I'm going to kill this.
Definitely.
Yeah. Let's see who has not talked.
I think we've heard from Anne or.
Yeah, we haven't heard from Anne, have we? And I think Anne's on, not just her picture.
I see her.
Hello. So,
Fire away, Anne.
hi,
What's keeping you up at night?
Oh, everything.
You can't say the dog.
So I bought the bookstore like a year ago. So I just had my first year anniversary. So I bought the inventory and the fixtures, but I changed the name and I had to move it into a space that is half the size of the old bookstore. So I have about 900 square feet for selling and I have no real storage. So I had a really good year. So my first year was much better than expected, which is great. But now I don't know if it was just the excitement of the newness. And so now I'm trying to figure out how to keep it going, the momentum, and keep marketing and increase sales a little bit so that it's even better next year. And it's mostly me. I have 3 people who cover me when I'm not here for meetings and things like that. So I don't want to burn out either. But I do have events, which is a lot of work planning and getting it posted everywhere. And sometimes, oh, and there's my phone. So thanks. I'm going to answer my phone.
It's very important to answer the phone. Jill, what about you? Do you have any additional insights?
Well, I guess for me, what keeps me up in general over these past few years is that any problem that I'm having with my store, it tends to like be a general problem that the industry is having. So like the way that Ken is thinking about this for BIPOC owners, I'm just trying to think about what is a sustainable path for small bookstores. How do you get started? How do you grow? Because to Shari and Ann's point, you really do need to be growing every year. You're going to be losing customers just through no fault of your own as they move away or get older or switch to ebooks or that sort of thing. So, you know, you need to constantly be gaining customers and constantly be increasing your sales so that you can keep up with inflation, so that you can grow and hopefully pay more staff so that the owner is not burning themselves out. So there does need to be kind of this path, you know, not only to get started, but to grow to first break even, then to profitability, and then even to sustainability. And so I see all of these issues that people have, and that's what keeps me up at night, is figuring out solutions and trying to get some success stories and figure out if they are if they would work for other people or if it's something that's unique to just that particular situation.
What are examples of each of success stories you've had experimenting and stuff that failed or didn't work?
I mean, I've made a lot of mistakes in 20 years. You know, I mean, the biggest mistake I see a lot of stores do is that they're undercapitalized, right? So, and maybe to Lisa's point about like not starting with a lot of inventory, it's hard to then grow to organically self-fund growth. Like it seems to me that stores start at a certain size and they stay that size because it's hard to fund growth. Like if you didn't have the capital to go in, where are you going to get the capital later when you want to grow the store, when you need to hire staff, when you need to expand your inventory, or where a great new opportunity pops up to be in a better retail space and you don't have that deposit or something. So I think that's, you know, one mistake I made, and one mistake I see a lot of people doing is that they're not looking at, you know, if you as the owner want to be making $100,000 a year in take home pay, how big does your store need to be? How many people do you need to employ? And then how much inventory do you need to have to create that volume of sales? And you work all the way backwards and you're like, wow, that takes a lot of capital to open a bookstore. Maybe I should just stick that in the stock market instead, you know? So it's like, how do you create a model where people can start small and then grow?
Yeah, it would seem to me that, tell me what you think of this, all of you, that what Lisa was talking about, her model, which is quite different in a way, which is overstaffing, but against success. You know, it's about, if I have 5 people working 5 hours and one of them is just focused on partnerships with other businesses or nonprofits, are they going to pay for themselves? You know, it's that thing of like, you may not have the capital, but if you can be wily and smart about adding horsepower without and having that then come back and pay for itself, that's great. We used to find that a lot of small when I was in the marketing business, that a lot of small companies would think if they spent $10,000 in a year on marketing and they made back 10,000, it was worth it. Not. You have to take into account the overhead of the store and there are other things. You're not just paying for your marketing. And the same thing with staff. If you're just paying for one person and, oh, at least we're breaking even on her or him, you know, it may not be enough. But I think Lisa's model, which is a sort of anti-capitalist model, if you will, she's a nonprofit, which is hire a number of smart people focus on training them to really engage the customers and be experts at books, which is sort of what James Daunt also focuses on at Barnes and Noble now. That may be what seems risky, but a good way to keep experimenting and building. I don't know. What do you think, Jill, or anybody else?
Well, I think this was one of the other lessons that I learned too late, right? Was I created a job for myself and not a business. A business is getting things done through other people, the way that Lisa's doing. And so you have to decide what you want, but if you want to eventually be able to retire and still have the store be sustainable and profitable, then you have to develop that staff. And it is risky, because there are a lot of times I've hired people and they haven't worked out, and then you're out all of that training and the money and stuff like that. And managing a bunch of people is also a skill that isn't really taught in school, and then you have to learn through experience. So it's one of those growing pains. I probably froze.
Yeah,
Did I
but
freeze?
voice is continuing, which is the important part.
Let me turn the camera on. Did I freeze?
You did, but
You
yeah.
did, but we could hear you fine.
It's an interesting thing, Jeff Deutsch
Yeah.
and
So
Grace-
I don't know where I was, but basically, like,
Hey, Jill, we lost you for a minute. Lisa wanted to say something about what you just said. Lisa, go ahead.
well, I appreciate, I think when we talk about bookstores, it sounds like we're talking about the same thing, but what I keep understanding is that we are all doing wildly different models and wildly different things. So if I'm depending on the shop to make a living as well as a life and as well as a life of purpose, that's a different thing than if I'm trying to build a business that can serve the community and do good things versus trying to do a nonprofit, and be a presence. And that is, you're planting the tree in a community space and trying to get everybody to own it. And I think those are really different things. And one of the unendingly interesting things for me about independent bookstores is that we are talking about so many different kinds of entities, so many different kinds of models. I think there will never be one. And what we're trying to look for, what are some of those principles or those things that help us all be successful? And I think that's why talking about our different perspectives helps us learn, because then we're trying to craft this unique model. Jeff Deutsch asserts that there is no profitable way to be a bookstore. I don't think that's true, and I've been doing research on that. But to his point, I don't take anything. I volunteer with hours, so we can be break even so long as I don't take any money. So, which if I were trying to make a living out of it or pay mortgage out of it, then we would be in a different spot. So those are all things to be considered as we think about these models.
Yeah, when a finance person is looking at buying a business, one of the things they always look at is the owner taking a salary or not? And if they're not, what would that salary cost to replace them? Suddenly a business that's making money is losing money when you figure it out that way. And that's one of the things. I thought Jill's point, though, about management skills is really important. And Lisa, you have a background of running a big factory with your husband. So probably you started from a different model in a way, and also you're a psychologist. So you started from a different model than other people, but everybody starts from their own place. What's missing in this industry, maybe Ken, you're working on this, is, and certainly some of the other consultants are trying to help with this now, is what are some of the basics that you really need to focus on, the sort of table stakes, whatever your business model is. And I think that should be in a big part of what we continue to discuss as we go forward. I'd love to hear more discovery around that. Any final thoughts, because we should end on time. I'm a big believer in ending on time. And yeah, let's see if there's anything in the chat that we need. A lot of stuff in the chat. Well, I'll save the chat and send it out, as well as a recording of this. But are there any final thoughts from anyone that they want to elegantly close the session. It's been terrific. This is really fascinating.
I'll just say that I think that this session is going to be in good hands with Steve. He has a passion for marketing, and you can really tell, and he's got a lot more marketing resources and background than I did. So I'm excited about where he's going to take this meetup.
Yeah, you know, I'm going to thank you, Jill, and that's a great way to get out of participating in the future. I
Please don't, because your questions are so good.
I'll take over the moderating and running and marketing. You just have to come and talk, because you're so smart. I did want to say that I'm going to try and get guests in. I was even thinking somebody that Lisa and I've talked to a couple times, which is Paul at City Lights Books, who's the chief buyer and pretty much runs the store. Is a fascinating guy about how he curates for City Lights, which is, you talk about a curated bookstore and a successful, and that's the model. So next time there will be somebody, I don't know if Paul will do it, and it'll be next time, but somebody in either the marketing world or the publishing world that has an interesting take. Will bond. If anybody has a suggestion of somebody they'd like, who they think is really wise and smart and not here, dubious anybody is wise and smart and not here, but still, let us know. I'll try and invite one person and have them not take over, but talk a little bit. So thank you so much. And see you next. So next we will be, let's see here now. We're going to be in February. And I think we're going to be on is the 14th Valentine's Day?
That's Winter
ABA.
Institute.
That's
Yeah.
Winter Institute.
That's Winter Institute. Yeah.
We may want to move it so that we're not on Winter Institute.
If we stick to the 7th, which is the first Wednesday, Shari, is that a problem for you next month?
Well, no worries. I mean, if I can always be late to them. That's fine.
Okay, because I love your
Yeah.
thinking. Okay. Thank you all. And Ken, from outside the bookselling world, you used to be a bookseller, I know. Thanks for joining us and all the rest of you.
Well, I hope people don't mind that I
No, please come back.
I may not be able to come all the time, or maybe that's not even appropriate that I do, but it is interesting for me even today from a professional standpoint.
If
So.
you can't make it all the time, I'm going to track you down, so you better come all the time.
Okay.
Yeah, you add so much, Ken. Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Bye-bye, everyone.